Okay, folks, so this is the experiment. So what I've done is I have labeled with masking tape my two jars, number 1 and number 2. I'm going to set one of the jars on my scale and notice it reads. So I'm going to go ahead and hit tare until it comes down to 0. Then I'm going to take the mass of my first egg, which looks like 61 grams. So I'm going to take this off and I'm going to label 61 grams on my lab sheet. And then I'm going to do the second one. Same thing, hit tare so that this becomes 0. Put the egg in, and this egg is 63 grams. So I'm going to write that on my lab sheet. That is the extent of our measuring. Now we are ready for step 1. Okay, so for the egg experiment, the first step was taking the measurements. And so I've got I wrote it actually on my tape, but it's also on my lab sheet. Now I'm going to pour in enough vinegar to cover the egg. And I'm going to be very careful not to spill it. Notice that when the egg is pushed down, it does cover the egg. So I'm going to do that with both eggs. You can see that there's bubbles that are starting to form on both eggs. And it's starting to bubble a little bit. So that's my first observation that I'm going to make. So this is the first step of our egg experiment. Okay, folks, so this is the second part of our egg experiment. And so what I did was I poured out the vinegar and rinsed off my egg. And you can see that the shell has dissolved, which is what we want. So what we're going to do now is take its measurement again. I'm just drying out the inside of my jar here a little bit. Set my jar on my scale, tare it so it's at 0. Put that in. And this is number 2, because apparently I did them out of order. It is now 80 grams. And so I wrote that down for my lab report. And this is egg number 1. So again, dry it off just a little bit with a paper towel. I'm not squeezing it super hard. You can see it's very squishy and gel-like. Don't break it, because if you squeeze it too much, you will break it. All right, so I cleaned off that, dried off my egg, tare that out. So now it is at 69, so number 1 is now at 69 grams. So now we're going to get to the actual tests that we're going to run here. So in egg number 1, I am going to put some distilled water. And so I'm again just going to take my distilled water here and cover my egg. Distilled water is just basic water without any additives or any minerals in it at all. It's just flat out plain water. So as you can see, there's my egg in distilled water. That's number 1. I'm going to set it off to the side, and it is going to sit there for another 24 hours. The other one is going to get corn syrup, which you should definitely have enough corn syrup to cover the egg. There we go. Completely before, dry this off a bit, putting your lid back on. Once you put the lid on, it will push it to the bottom. There you go. And so now you can see my corn syrup here on egg number 2. And again, we're going to wait 24 hours and then see what happens. Okay, folks, so as you can see, this is my egg it's my egg number 2 from the corn syrup. So I'm going to go ahead and take its final mass. It's been in the corn syrup for 24 hours. And so it is now 45. Whoop, messed with it a little there. Is now 45 grams. So I do not have the egg from the distilled water because while I was rinsing it off, I accidentally broke it. So you have to be very careful with these to make sure that you do not break them. Either way, you take your final measurements and then write down your amounts in your lab sheet.